Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer Susan Rosenberg Jones as tonight's guest speaker. After graduating Lesley College with a degree in education, Susan moved from Boston to New York City and attended SVA to study photography. She then worked as a custom black and white printer before embarking on a 34-year career in the stock photography industry. In 2008, Susan lost her husband of 30 years after a long illness. She met Joel in 2009 the following year, and they married in 2012. Her project, Second Time Around, celebrates the quirks and discoveries of her new relationship. The project was shown at the Center for Fine Art Photography Colorado and at CCNY here in New York. It was also honored in the 2017 edition of Critical Mass. Susan's most recent body of work, Widower, was given a solo exhibition at the Griffin Museum in Massachusetts, and images from the project are currently on view at the Howland Cultural Arts Center in Beacon, New York. Publications include Lens Scratch, Float Magazine, The American Scholar, and F-Stop Magazine, among others. Please help me welcome Susan Rosenberg Jones to our lecture series.
Thank you, Jaime, for that introduction, and welcome everyone. All right, so I'm going to run through childhood, and when I was a very, very small child, this might have even been pre-reading, I discovered some magazines on my parents' a low bookshelf, and they were old magazines from the 30s and 40s, and they were like little digest size called Coronet, and I wasn't interested in the articles, but each magazine, I used to look through them, had a section on photography, and it was fine art photography. They called it the Coronet Gallery of Master Photographs. So this cover looks very familiar, even though I'm probably around 4 years old. So they had great spreads. Like this was Louis Hine. This one, the photographer Stephen Deutsch, but this is the kind of photograph that just floored me when I was a kid. I stared at these photos, and the black and white, the lighting, the drama, everything about it, there were lots of, the magazines had this kind of work, and I'm surprised that now I don't do such dramatic work, because it really made an impression. They even did celebrities, but they did them in a really classy way. So this is a David Seymour spread on Audrey Hepburn. So then the family had a little Kodak plastic brownie camera, and I used to walk around, I guess inspired by Coronet, what I'd seen. I would walk around the neighborhood and take pictures, and there was this woman, this neighbor who was a school teacher. She also, she had kids. She took an interest. She saw that I was interested in photography, and she bought me a book. And the book was it was a paperback beginner's guide to how to do photography or something. And I loved that book. I went through it cover to cover. And so then I guess I decided I guess there must have been a section on portraiture. So my poor brother, like 2 months ago, I saw him, and he said that he can't look at this picture because he has PTSD. But he was my little brother. He was around 6 there, so I must have been about 9½. And you know how when you have little brothers, you make them do things? So I made him put on his dress pants and his little dress blazer and his clip-on tie, one of my father's hats, and this girl, Rhonda, I asked her to put a dress on, and I threw the beads on her in a beach hat, and I set them up, and so I think of that as my first intentional photo. And then what happened was I went to, one day later, I think I was an early teen, maybe about 14, 15. I was in downtown Boston at a historic cemetery with my friend Emily, and we were doing grave rubbings on the, I don't know if you ever did that when you were a kid, grave rubbings. And we're having a great time, and this boy around our age came up to us. He had a camera around his neck. And so he told us he was learning how to do photography at this place called the Boston Film Center. So he took us there, and oh my God, it was great. So I started going to the Boston Film Center, and this generous man who had it was a storefront, but in the back he had a darkroom, and he taught us, any kids who wanted to learn, developing and printing, and he gave us little loaner cameras, and we walked around. So at home, I guess this is one of my early attempts. See how it's really bad, right? Look at the contrast. But, you know, that was my grandfather visiting us. Then, I don't know if this is when I got my Minolta and later my Pentax. Anybody remember the Pentax K1000? Okay, so I started to get a little bit better. And I guess I was experimenting with color. But, you know, it's funny, when I look at these early photos, I'm basically still taking these same photos. I mean, that's the point. You know, like you know, you just start off, and when you look at your whole life, I mean, you know, you have a passion and you just keep working with it. So then when I went to SVA in the, I moved to New York in '76. I guess I went to SVA '77, '78 as an undergrad, but I didn't have to take it. I was exempt from academic classes. I started a project. I used to do these street portraits, pubescent girls, but I never like took it too far. But it was the first time I think I started to think in terms of a body of work. I loved the teacher. There was one teacher who taught printing, and I really learned a lot from him. It was Bob Brooks. I don't know, some of you might remember him. He retired from SVA a few years ago, but he was great. So then after 2 years of SVA, I said, this is ridiculous. I don't want to get a second college undergrad degree, so I'm just going to work. So I started working in a darkroom as a printer, and I became a custom printer. And the New York Times, I guess at that time, people could rent darkrooms by the hour. And the place I worked at, where I worked, Photographics Unlimited, you could rent a darkroom, but they also did custom work. Photographers would drop off film, and so I loved that job. It was around that time that my husband and I, we were living on 22nd Street. He was a vocal coach and vocal arranger. I'm only showing you this photo to show you what New York was like in those days. It was like vanishing New York. This was a community center in the Lower East Side that some friend of his was starting. And we walked over there to check it out. He sat down, he went into a music room, sat down on the piano, and this woman appeared with her baby. And she said, you know, I'd like to sing. And so we started playing the piano, and she had the most beautiful voice. And, you know, she could go there for free, just drop in, or maybe pay as you go or something. But that was like, I just wanted to give you a glimpse of New York, Lower East Side. That just wouldn't happen now, at least in Manhattan, as far as I know. And then while I was still working in the darkroom, I guess they had on the bulletin board, they had an ad for pictures of pregnant women, and I had photographed, to see on the right, that's my dearest friend, and that's her, pregnant with her second child. And I had done this artful portrait, and somehow this sort of, it looks really cheesy, right? Approaching a man who turns you on, yes, you can make the first move. So I mean, this like what I thought was a very artistic photo of my friend ended up in this article. It just seemed sort of like it didn't work, but I mean, that was how it was fine. Okay, I'm only showing you this. I know it's a terrible photo. I used a wide-angle lens, and it's sort of distorted, but that was my baby. And the reason I'm showing you this, because I can be in the worst mood, I can be depressed, I can be, you know, whatever, and I look at this picture to this day, and she's 38, and the power of a photo, you know, it's like, I love this picture. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And then, well, after she was born, really, my photography was sort of relegated to family stuff. So there she is with her dad, playing. This was like, you know, I always liked Helen Levitt. I always felt that it was sort of Helen Levitt-y. And then after she was around 17 months, I went to work in a stock photo agency called FPG, which morphed later into Getty. It's now Getty. And I was there for 34 years in the stock photo world as a researcher, as licensing images, like working at sales. And it was a lot of fun. I used to tell people, well, I'm not really shooting actively, but I'm looking at pictures all day, and that's really what it was. This is how they used to lovingly mount each 35 millimeter on a separate piece of cardboard and cover it with the plastic envelope. And we would kind of flip them and look through them and, you know, look into the light box. And I think that's where I learned to make judgments really quickly about photos. And it was really an interesting job because you had to choose photos, you know, you had to think about who the audience was and what they were trying to say. And so it was great. But So there's another, see, I used to just do stuff like that in the house, just play. So then after my husband died in 2008, and then in 2009 I started to take classes again. I wanted to go back to really serious photography. And so I went to ICP and started taking continuing ed classes. And I really liked the personal vision classes a lot. So this is something I did in, Amy Arbus taught a class called the Narrative Portrait, which Jennifer was a TA for. That's how I got to know you. And basically, it was this wonderful couple that I knew a little bit. I wasn't close friends with them, but I knew them. And they were very interesting visually. She had lost her leg to cancer when she was young, in her 20s. And they were both actors. They live in Manhattan Plaza. And she's a composer, a playwright. She's an activist now for performers with disabilities. So I just did, over a 10-week period and beyond, I just photographed them. That's them with their daughter. It's the daughter, I guess she was home from college. They have a gym there, and Anita, she's amazing. They were at a friend's house rehearsing for something. Okay, and then after I photographed them, I started photographing, got interested in photographing people, like couples who had been together for a long time, over a number of years. So I started doing that, and my next door neighbors qualified for that, and so I photographed them. And then I started to get interested in, well, what about my other neighbors, like people on my floor? I've known for years, but I haven't really known them. I haven't been in all of their homes. And I'm always interested in, especially in a high-rise building, because like we're in the J line. But like the J line downstairs, it's the same layout, but how did people, their homes look so different? It's just so interesting to me. So I started to photograph people on my floor, and that's Estelle. These are the people across the hall. So then when I started to photograph in the building, I realized that, I was more interested in the original tenants who had been there since the 70s. The building went through some changes. It used to, for a while, it was a long time, it was a Mitchell-Lama. It was for middle-income people. You had to qualify. You couldn't make too much money or too little. So there were a lot of artists and writers and accountants and nurses and teachers. I know, I just found this one and I said, oh, I don't know. You open up your hall and there's that, your door. So I started to think of it more as like the story of these original tenants who were hanging onto their apartments because, they got out of the building. Someone bought the building and they got out of the tax abatement situation, and the Mitchell was able to leave Mitchell-Lama so that he could, renovate apartments and charge like market rates. So the original tenants, we had a great tenant association, ended up fighting for, well, it's sort of like rent stabilized. And it's a great place to live, but Tribeca has changed so much. But all of us have been through it together. And Ginia Belafonte in the New York Times wrote a couple of years ago that Independence Plaza is the last bastion of diversity in Tribeca. So I'm, kind of proud to live there. And, the neighborhood's great. And it's nice now that we have a Whole Foods. I'm not complaining. Certain things about gentrification are pretty good. I mean, there's different generations. Like she lives in one apartment and her daughter lives in another. I photographed the common areas. And, people who aren't from New York, like this was just looking out the terrace of one of the people I photographed. They just can't get over. That's what you see sometimes. people do all kinds of things. They're rental apartments, but they live, you know, people like moved in the 70s and they lived there for years. So they put in French doors and do all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally do in a rental apartment. I know, I went through this whole woman's house, but this is like, she was so proud of this toilet too. She goes, oh. I said, oh my God. She goes, yeah, I got it on eBay. And it was so funny. This is John. He just passed away. And I was really, you know, they asked me to use this photo at his memorial service. So then in 2016, on Facebook, somebody who I'd worked with at FPG, who was a photo editor at the time, had moved to Pennsylvania and was teaching photography at a college near Scranton. She said, I love your, you know, this building 1, can you show it in this gallery in Scranton? So I did. So I think it was around 26 photos. It's sort of in the basement area of a frame shop, which a lot of galleries are right there. And it was great. It was a really nice opening. A lot of people came. There was a lot of colleges and libraries around the area where people came from there, and it was good. And then just this past month in December, I was very pleased to show in my own neighborhood the editors of the Tribeca Trib, which is a community paper. In Tribeca, it's like they just had their 25th anniversary. And they were trying to cull photos from the history of Tribeca. And so they asked me, they chose these 7 photos, and that was in the gallery's Apex Art Gallery in Tribeca on Church Street. So that was really nice. It was really nice to be part of that. A lot of the people in the community came, a lot of people from Independence Plaza. It just, you know, made us think about the neighborhood and how it used to be and where it's gone and all that. So then we move on. After, let's see. So I met Joel, my husband had died in 2008. I met Joel in 2009. And I started to photograph him because he was just such a, I mean, well, what happened was when I fell in love with him and we were a couple, I started to, you know, take some photos. I mean, this guy is just, you know, what can I tell you? So at the time, I took a class with Jen Davis, who's really wonderful, called the Intimate Portrait at ICP. And I chose Joel for my intimate portrait. I mean, why not, you know? So I just had the best time. These are like early ones, but I love this. Like, I love him here. I tried briefly, I said, well, let me see how it would be if I did a self-portrait with him, like, but I didn't, you know, that was just an experiment that failed. I said, nah, I'm in the photos. I don't need to literally be in them. The one thing about Joel is he comes home and he takes off his clothes like right away. And they're off the whole time he's home unless somebody knocks on the door or we have guests or he has to take the garbage, whatever it is. You know, he's naked. So, you know, there he is. He's just comfortable in his own skin. And he developed an interest in bonsai trees. And so that's our little studio office room. And he had some bonsai in there. After dinner, like, there he is. This is on vacation. Well, we were at a bed and breakfast up in New Hampshire. And then it's weird because 3 or 4 years later, I took almost the same photo in an Airbnb in Portland, Oregon. And Joe loves cooking. He loves to cook. And it's great for me because, A, I don't have to cook as I have to anymore. And B, he's really good at it. So that's why I go to the gym every day. But there he is, like he's always wanting me to taste. So there he was. It looked like he made onion rings. I think he made onion rings or something. It was delicious. Once in a while, he treats himself to a shave at the barbershop. And I said, I'm going. I want to take pictures of this. And I thought this looked like sort of orgasmic to me. Like he's just in bliss. The pensive mood. Sometimes he does these things with his mouth that I don't even get. So there he is. We're in Maine having clam chowder. And then we're in Maine having ice cream. Shaving. It's a rare time you see him with a shirt on. It was winter and it was really cold. It was like 2017. It was cold that January. Out on we live on the 39th floor, so it's a top floor. So people really can't look in. And I don't think he cares really anyway. So, so he's doing his bonsai trees there. There he was, I say, with a real tree, with a full-grown, like in-the-ground tree, like studying it in Maine. He's always wants to take a nap, you know, catch a little Z's. So we were in a motel. We had gone up to Beacon, I think, to see a gallery show, and stayed over. There he is. I don't know why I like this picture. I think it's like, it's a Wyeth type thing to me. But there we were at the Clark Museum. It was just funny. He does like to document his creations. This one, I was like on the couch and he walked by and I said, oh my God, you know, the way the trees reflected on his back and tush. And this, you know, you walk into the house and I'll see things like that all the time. Oh, and then last December, I don't know, the stars convened, and I use a Canon 5D Mark III, and I'm always using the 35 millimeter, like stays on it unless I do a job, like events. Occasionally I do a photograph an event or something, and I use a different lens, but I use the 35 for all of this work. But I got a Leica Q last December, and so I've been doing some of them now with the Leica Q because it's little and it's kind of subversive around the house. So the rest of these are all with the Q, and it's working pretty well. Now, he didn't let me show this picture for a long time. But look, I mean, this is like my new favorite photo. Come on. I said, no Facebook, no Instagram, but okay. I'm just still looking for, I'm trying to get the perfect picture with his ears. I did one with my phone at night in bed, so I have to try that again, like, you know, at a different moment with my camera. And I got a call from Orestes Gonzalez a few weeks ago that he wanted me to be in the show. It's called Life Interrupted. It's a photography exhibition focused on lives altered by circumstance. So I guess he wanted me to show the work from Second Time Around. So that opening is Saturday night, 7 to 10 in Long Island City at the Plaxel Gallery. I hope the weather is good because I looked at the weather, it didn't look so great, but. All right, and so then we get to, so during the time I'm still photographing Second Time Around, but during the time at the height of it, I was still, I was thinking about, I'd like to do something with widows and widowers, because the experience for me was so profound that I felt, and I also felt that when I was widowed, that I couldn't find, like I wanted to read something. You know, I was like young, I was only in my late 50s, so I didn't have people around me who had the same experience. And I wanted to do something for other people because I would have liked a body of work to see something where other people were saying and how other people dealt with it. So so I started, what happened was, another photographer and I were talking about it, and he had a series that he couldn't get started. I felt like I had an emotional block for a couple of years, but it was rolling around in my head, and so he had this similar situation, so we said, okay, we're just going to get started. We're just going to get started. So I made myself start, and I said to Daryl, Daryl, I want to photograph you, and of course Daryl's a doll, he agreed, and he had lost his Roger the year before. He died in his sleep. It was totally unexpected. So I found an app, an iPhone app called Temi, T-E-M-I, and you record with it, but it also transcribes. It's great. So because I wanted to, I thought if I just did portraits, it wouldn't be enough because you don't know why somebody's sitting there. I wanted people to know the story. So I started with Daryl. What I would do is, what I do still, I have a conversation with the person and I tell them it can take as little, the whole thing as little as an hour, like a half-hour conversation, a half-hour photo. Sometimes it goes longer. But most people will give me an hour if they decide to do it. I also ask them to sign a model release. So I've been lucky that I put here and there, I'll post a photo on Facebook. I usually put them in Instagram, but people recommend other people to me. Here's one. Sometimes I can't decide which photo to use from the take. You know, so like here's Carol. I really like this one. Someone else said, no, I like this one better. And then I got, you know, confused about it. But anyway, those choices, sometimes it's hard to make a decision. Some of the photos I don't think are so successful, but, you know, you just grab the circumstance. She wanted to, you know, me to meet her at the ferry where she was going home, and it was a horrible windy day. Some people have kids, you know, and so when they lose their spouse, they're dealing with the children, and they can't really mourn because they have to worry about how the kids are feeling, and that's really hard. I went to her shiva at the end of November, and a couple weeks later, she said, I'm ready. So because he had been sick for a long time, her husband, and it was sort of expected, but, you know. Here's another one. I wished I'd photographed him at home, but we couldn't coordinate it. She lives in my building. I was using this photo of this guy, Edward. He's 94, like in this picture, now he's 95. 94, look at that guy. See, I was using this one. Now I think I like this one. Same with this now. I don't love either of these, but the first one I liked at first, and then someone said, oh, but she looks uncomfortable the way she's sitting, and so I used that one, but now I'm starting to like this one because I like the light and the color and the this one, you know, I don't usually bring lights in because I trust myself so much with available light, and I love the challenge, but she had scaffolding around her building, and it was like a cave in there, and it was like 12 in the afternoon, a bright day. So I kind of regret not bringing lights, but this was only 7 weeks since her husband died, and if I went back, I guess I would have to change her text because she'd be saying different things probably. Now, just to show you, this is Gayle. I'll just show you a piece of text. So this is how it looks. I put the name of the person, or the name, you know, and just the first name and maybe an initial. The years that they were together, because some people never get married, but they're together. Other people were together for 20 years and then they got married, but it's all the same. So married or no, it doesn't matter. They were together 46 years, and then this was 9 years since he died. So everybody has something new to offer. Like she said, I wished I'd done more. I wished I'd been kinder, frankly. But I did as well as I could, and he did as well as he could too. I mean, we loved each other to the end. We weren't always as nice to each other as we should have been, so I try to remember that. There are some people who, you know, were not happily married. I always ask them. Most of them say they were, and they were, but she talked a lot about the touch, the power of touch, and how when her husband was sick, you know, and that's really, it's true. It's important. I had to meet him in the clinic, this waiting room of his multiple sclerosis clinic, because he, you know, that was most convenient. This woman, it was only 2.5 years since he had died, and she was really having a hard time with it. She's still having a hard time with it. I photographed this last spring, I think. She says, I think living on my own was one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with. Just figuring out, how do I feed myself? Because there were always 2 of us, you know, and when you go from 2 to 1, sometimes I don't eat. Sometimes it's like 2 or 3 days and I'm like, did I eat? this woman I went to high school with. But we weren't really friends in high school, although we wonder why, because we like each other. But she had a lot to say. It was 7 months later, and she was just devastated because it was a late in life marriage, and they'd been together 25 years, or later in life, I guess. But the saddest thing was, she says, I have to be home because I keep saying I think he's lost, and I have to be here in case he comes back. I want him to find me here. I have no desire to travel. It's like your mind plays tricks on you, you know. It's like, you know the person's gone, but there's still this, like, little hope. So some of you know who this is, Paula Tognerelli of she's the executive director of the Griffin Museum, and she had lost her wife, maybe 4 or 5 years after, you know, before we sat down. And she was so generous with her time, and we had a great time. We talked for an hour and a half, I think. And he's remarried, but he told me really something poignant. His wife was sick with cancer, and he said, we did a renewal of the vows when she was already very sick. I surprised her. We had friends over for a barbecue when she was already pretty ill. And I said, okay, we're now going to do a renewal of the vows. I had a friend act as the rabbi, so to speak, and read something that I had prepared. It made her feel really good. So if you could do something like that for your spouse, it can make them feel very special. This guy was having a really hard time, too. His wife had lots of hobbies and interests, and he only likes jazz and going out at night to jazz clubs. I think he used to be a promoter or something. And so during the day, he's sort of lost. This woman, they lived together for 20 years. And then they decided to, let's just get married. So about a week before they were going to get married, he died. This one was just so in love with her husband. There were people who saw us weeks before he died. They thought we were newlyweds. It was that kind of relationship. We never walked down the street without holding hands. We'd go to a movie and he'd be patting me on the knee, and my heart still skipped a beat when he came into the room. And that's 16 years since. Santiago, it was 2 years since his wife had died, and he just cried through the whole talk. These two, each one was widowed, and they were introduced by a mutual friend. And now they have, it's her biological grandchild. You see down there in the bottom right, Charlie. So now they can play with her together. I mean, it's like it's a nice thing for them. She was very young when her husband died, I think around 40. She says, the way I kind of wrap my head around it all is, it's not just that someone died, it's like a weird way to end the relationship. It's the weirdest way because all these conversations were never finished and nothing is ever resolved. Bonnie's the most recent one I photographed in September. She had a lot to say. The paradox of my life is, she's the second person Carol earlier was one of them too, that when their husband was sick, they got cancer. So they both were sick. And Bonnie said she was in one hospital room and her husband was in the other. It was like terrible. So she said, the paradox of my life, but she's better now. My life is, I raised 3 kids. I had a marriage for 40 years. I had 2 3/4-time jobs. I was working more than 60 hours a week. I had a sick husband at the end to be with and attend to as much as I could. And then all of a sudden, I'm a widow and I have so much empty time. And that realization was profound. I still struggle with it because once mortality hits, you lose your life partner. I mean, I didn't even need to get cancer to have that mortality message. And then I got cancer. So mortality hits and you think, okay, fortunately, I've survived. How do I want to spend my time? What is worth my time? And so that's an ever-evolving quest. And then she says, I will never tell someone not to feel sad. Impossible. So here's installation shots of the show at the Griffin. It was in the Griffin Gallery, which is this like sweet room. I was just thrilled that it was in that room. It just sort of worked with the subject matter somehow. And you could see the text to the right of the photos. Yeah, I put a guest book there, and I was thrilled because a lot of people wrote in it, and it was really meaningful to read it. And then I made this, someone made a suggestion to put the text, extended texts, from the widows that were on the wall, and also because I could only have 14 in that room, but I had 31 at the time. So someone suggested to put everybody's text in and put extended text in, you know, more than I put on the wall. So I made this little mag cloud book, and people, you know, so here's like everybody's in here, show and tell. But I have, you know, longer text, you know, from their statements. And I also put a reading list in here because I asked everybody if there was anything that helped them that they had read. So people gave me names of books and good suggestions, so. There it is. Oh, Paula insisted on selling it, so I actually sold. Who knew? So I'm very pleased with this other exhibit that's up in Beacon right now. It's called The Sympathetic Eye. I was contacted by Susan Kaiser, who's a wonderful photographer, but she wanted to curate this show of 4 photographers, and she said she wanted to do contemporary portraiture. So it's Paul Kessel, Janet Holmes, Joanne Chouse, and me. And this place, it's this historic, this landmark building in Beacon called the Howland Cultural Center, and I think it was a library. Look at that. It's like gorgeous. So I was on the bottom there from door to door, and Joanne does vertical, so her work fit upstairs perfectly. And this was the opening, I don't know, was it last Saturday, 2 weeks ago? So this runs through the 27th. It's really kind of only open, I think, on the weekends. You have to like look them up and make sure, you know, when you want, if you wanted to take the train up to Beacon. I mean, if you were going there for another reason, but. Oh, and then what Susan did, she didn't really have room to put the text the way I had them before. So she put them on these strips that were rolled so people, she thought it would be a nice thing for people to open them up and sort of feel like interactive, she called it. Some people liked it, some didn't, but, you know. And then she wanted to show Joel, too, so there he is. That's it. Thank you.
So I thought everything was really good, and I wouldn't reshoot the picture with the light coming in with the scaffolding. I thought the lighting was great. It was interesting.
Which picture?
The one where you were concerned about the scaffolding blocking the light.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was great. I would have never thought twice about the light. In fact,
you.
it was interesting because there were different spots of lighting, and I thought it was
you.
great.
Oh,
but I thought the picture was really powerful. But I have to say this. Joel is one of my favorite people. I've only met once at Brad and Jen's thing. But Joel doing the turkey with the rubber gloves, I wish there was a version of his surgical gloves and dissecting a turkey. Because I think there's a Joel... maybe book somewhere out there.
Yeah, I do. I actually, yeah, you're right. I put that photo on Facebook, but it could be, yeah.
There's a packaging of Joel in your future.
Because
I think. It's very good.
there's a lot of opportunity actually because he does wear those surgical gloves to do a lot of cooking.
The whole combination. He's fascinating.
Yeah, I know. I know it's.
The whole thing.
I know. Anyone else? I think I tried so hard to keep it an hour, and I talked fast. Sorry.
I wonder if, since Joel is here, I mean, Joel, not to put you on the spot, you don't have to do this, but you're here. No, that's not what I was gonna say. Maybe you can speak a little bit to what it feels like being a muse to somebody else, and how this project has changed, you know, your life or your idea of home. I'd be curious to hear.
Well, for me, I'm not aware that Susan is taking her photos. And as a matter of fact, when she started doing this, I said, really? And she just thought that I was a great subject. And she likes unposed photographs, and of course, in my case, undressed photographs. So we just continued, and my being a subject for her is sort of like supporting her photography. I mean, I'm very, very pro her competency and excellence in photography, and that's, I think that she should be able to photograph whatever she wants in order to accomplish the goals that she sees. And so I'm happy to be a subject.
All right.
Thanks, Doll.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Susan, can I ask you, from your point of view, like how has starting a project on Joel altered the relationship, or what has that brought into the equation?
Oh, I think it's just brought more fun into our relationship, frankly, because he's part of the he's part of the process, you know, like we're collaborating. Like whenever I take a portrait, I feel like I'm collaborating with the sitter, but with him, you know, it's deeper than that, even though I try to take photos a lot of times when he doesn't even know, but then I always show him the results. Unless I think he's not going to like it, and then I wait a while till he's in the right mood. Like the one on the, well, you know, the one where he's on the step stool. But
does he ever say don't show it?
yes. Well, that when I first showed him to that, to him he said, delete it, delete it. So I said, all right, but I didn't. Yes.
Great work, all of it.
Thank you.
There's this great quote by Emmett Gowan about how if you set out to photograph love, you can't do it. You have to be in love and then photograph it, and in that way you will show it. And his wife also said that she would know at certain times, like when the light hit a certain way, she learned that she should pause. Do you guys find that you're in that rhythm now?
Sometimes I think, you know, there were some times when, like, there was a photo with him on the couch, sideways, and I know you knew I was photographing you, and the light was just right. I think, you know, it is a labor of love. It's definitely an act of love, and I think Joel feels that too. And when I photograph him, I think he's happy because he feels my love for him, because he's, you know, I'm photographing something that I'm feeling. So, yeah, I think so.
The barbershop picture would also seem like a good example of that to
Right.
me. Yeah, where everybody's in sync.
Yeah.
I think that's also very apparent in your other series as well, with your subject matter, how intimate they are and how very personal they are. So you obviously spend a lot of time with your subject matters, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I try to get as deep in as I can, you know. It's hard, you know, it's hard with people, you don't know somebody, but sometimes it doesn't matter because you click with them anyway. That's why I always like to talk to them for a while first. That's,
Could you talk a little bit about your process in selecting the backgrounds, and if these aren't posed pictures of your neighbors, could you talk about how you decided where to put them? And
oh, with the neighbors, I walk around the house. I always say, can I walk around the house? We walk around. With the widows, too. We walk around, and sometimes I photograph in a different room. Okay, try sitting here, try moving there. And most of them are pretty, you know, oh, sometimes I'll say, look, see where the light's coming in. I like that. So it's like I walk around, and I find the environment that feels right. Sometimes it's like obvious right away, but other times I photograph in different areas. With Joel, he's usually like somewhere, like on the couch or on the table or at the table or something. So I just, you know, I don't like to crop or anything, so I move around and I just sort of find the right angle. I'm jumping around, like, you know, those funny YouTube videos where people are like, you know, so like that, but in a quiet way. Because, you know, yeah, I'm not a studio person. With the widows especially, or even the building one, I go into houses, I don't know what they're gonna look like and what the lighting is gonna be. So I just, you know, I like the challenge of finding the right background. And it's, you know, making snap decisions sometimes, like, you know, where to put the person's head, the colors, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that comes into play, and just like looking at the inside the frame. So.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, we're looking at the projects. You've spent your own sweet time on working on all of these bodies of work. I have two questions. Do you have a favorite in that? And is there anything that you're working on right now?
Oh, a favorite? Well, I guess second time around is probably my favorite. Right now, I'm still working on the widows. I have 1 or 2 people set up for February. I want to do a few more and get the work out a little more, because I'm thinking about, you know, bereavement centers and hospital. You know, I really want to get it out to people, because, you know, just general people, not just photographers, respond to it. So, but I don't know what my next project's going to be. I'd like to do something based on, like, about my daughter, but she's like always working and always busy, so it's hard, but I would like to.
You gotta have your daughter.
Right.
Because you have all your family. You know.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like, you know, you do that, it's silly, like, 9 best on Instagram. I did mine, and they were all pictures of her. Every time I put her on Instagram, it's like, whoa, they'll go nuts. So it's like, ugh, you know. But no, I would like to do something with her. I don't know, I've been thinking about it.
I love the work.
Thank you.
With the Widow series, there's more pretty common effect of you know, gravity in a lot of the photographs, obviously. I'm just wondering if sometimes I'm sorry. Sometimes the smile can ruin a photograph, and I'm just wondering if you, what you say to them, or if you ask them not to smile, or how that goes.
There was only one person who was big, gave me a big old smile, and it was like she was trying to be like a headshot or I said, no, just trying to look, you know, calm and thoughtful, and what I do is I talk to them. You know, I just start bantering and talking, and then they get into thinking about whatever it is we're talking about, and then they kind of relax. You know, I try not to say don't smile, because it sounds like I'm trying to make them look sad, and that's not really it. Right. I just want them to look authentic, you know. And most of the time they do, because we've been talking for half an hour about it. So they are feeling pretty pensive. But sometimes there's a little bit of a smile, like Paula had a little smile. But she loves nature, and I thought it was a hopeful look, you know.
What's the furthest you've traveled for the Widower project? Or they'll pretty much, I know Paula is not in New York, but
right. Well, I'm going to Chicago in February, just for one person, basically. I haven't been traveling that much. Sometimes when we go away, I try to see if there's anybody. Like when we were in Santa Fe, but there wasn't anybody. Sometimes when we take vacations, you know, I try to find people, but it doesn't always work. But I did the Boston area. I did the high school person and Paula, maybe somebody else. But I would travel. So I'm going to go to Chicago, because I think this one will be very interesting, and I'm going to enjoy it.
All right. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.